Welcome metalheads to No Nonsense Metal Reviews. I'm George and today I have another band you need to hear. Another recommendation of a band that if you're not familiar with these guys, you really ought to check them out. Make yourself acquainted. So today's band you need to hear only had one full-length album to their name and a couple of demos. They didn't quite make it well into the 90s, splitting up in, I think it was 1991. But the one album that they did have, I feel it is significant enough to warrant them being a band you need to hear. I did actually struggle for a little while choosing whether it should be a band you need to hear or an underrated album. But I think that Carnage, old school Swedish death metal band with their one and only album Dark Recollections, is such an interesting and enjoyable piece of music that it's definitely worthy of the recommendation. Carnage are a band you need to hear. Now they've got an interesting lineup and certainly an interesting history and story to them as well. So this album, Dark Recollections, released in 1990, this is one of the first and certainly one of the pioneering old school death metal albums of the Sunlight Studios sound. Produced by Thomas Skogsberg, who had worked with the likes of Entombed, with Dark Throne, with Grave, and would go on working with Dismember. Produced all of these albums at Sunlight Studios, and a lot of them bear the same sort of signature characteristics and sounds. There's lots of electronic drums and triggers. There's very similar guitar tone and pattern. But this album, although it does bear those characteristics and it does sound like those, I think this is a really interesting, very heavy, very enjoyable album. Of course, it is it's raw, it's primitive, it's a little bit juvenile in its construction, but it's just good old school nasty death metal. So lineup wise, we've got a very interesting lineup here because we have Michael Amott, who you may be familiar with as he went on to join Carcass and then later to create Arch Enemy, two bands I absolutely love, and I think he's a fantastic guitarist, full of killer riffs, that man. So you've got Michael Amott. Then you have three members of Dismember, who only a year later would go on to release this classic pivotal death metal album, Like an Ever-Flowing Stream. So personnel-wise, you have Matti Kaki on vocals, you've got David Blomkist on guitars, and you've got Fred Estby on drums. Sorry if I'm absolutely butchering the pronunciation of those names, but those guys were members of Dismember. So there is no surprise at all that quite a lot of the material from this album, Dark Recollections, actually stems from Dismember's early demo material as well, and also the sound, the style, the vocals, the guitars, it sounds like Dismember. But almost you could say that this was like the jumping off point, the platform, the launch pad for what Dismember actually became. But I think this is a damn fine album, highly enjoyable stuff. I think you've got some killer material even amongst those tracks that featured as Dismember demos with the likes of Torn Apart, Blasphemies of the Flesh, Infestation of Evil, Self-Dissection, Death Evocation. It even sounds like such typical generic old school Scandinavian death metal, but I think this sounds freaking great. You've got, what have we got here? We've got 9 tracks and a outro piece on the core of the album, and it's just start to finish grisly old school death metal. Some really rough and nasty buzzsaw guitar work there, killer riffs, and I have to say, you know, this is quite a, should we say, juvenile. It's young, it's a little bit naive in some places in its writing and construction. But I think it's a solid album. I think these guys show quite a lot of talent, quite a lot of understanding, quite a good understanding of the old school death metal ways and the sound that they wanted to have. I think this is a solid album. Highlights for me, personally, Torn Apart. I think that's a fantastic track. Infestation of Evil, Gentle Exhuming. There is a particularly good track, which is definitely an original of Carnage, which is Malignant Epitaph. It's great stuff. Really enjoyable, old school death metal. Lots of killer riffs, tons of crunch, plenty of groove. It's really good stuff. What we do get here on this particular version, I think it's been remastered or re-released again since this. This is a remaster on Earache Records. I think they've actually done it again with full dynamic range, whatever that happens to mean. But they've done it, I believe that version excludes the bonus material, which I really don't understand. And that also happened with the reworkings of like At the Gate, Slaughter of the Soul, where you just get the core album, none of the bonus material, the EPs and stuff like that, whatever. But on this one, we've got the inclusion of the Day Man Lost demo from 1989. We've got rough mixes from that demo, and we've also got the Infestation of Evil demo from 1989 as well. Now those are tracks that really, they're for the diehards, they're for the fans, they're for people that really like rough, raw, demo quality, putrid old school death metal. But you know what, it's quite enjoyable actually. From the Day Man Lost demo, we've got Crime Against Humanity, which is a really rough, almost grindcore track. The title track of that demo is good as well. The Infestation of Evil demo, we've got 2 album tracks here. Again, it's that Dismember track, Torn Apart, and Infestation of Evil. It's good, nasty, old school death. And I think because of the fact that they only had 1 album and they are long extinct now, that the members went on to produce and be a part of such pivotal bands, such important and big bands like Dismember, Carcass or Arch Enemy, that this lovely little album, Dark Recollections, is very easily forgotten about. But I think this period with Carnage is very important. And I think that considering it came out a year before a lot of those classic Sunlight Studio sounding old school death metal albums, I think it makes it something that is not to be missed, certainly if you're an old school death metal fan. So if you like rough, raw, nasty, evil, putrid sounding death metal, Carnage are band you need to hear. And this is a mighty fine album, Dark Recollections. Been listening to it quite a few times lately actually, in preparation of doing this review, and it's really grown on me a lot actually. I remembered that it was a good Entombs Left Hand Path sounding album, but I didn't realise just how good it is. Just give it a chance. You know, yes, it's primitive, yes, it's a bit naive, but hey, death metal and old school death metal, that's what it's all about. Killer riffs, nasty metal. So, if you like Dismember, then you're definitely going to like Carnage. If you're not familiar with either of these bands, to be honest, check them out. They are bands you need to hear. Let me know what you think of Carnage. I'm very interested to hear. Thank you very much for watching, my friends. Feel free to like and subscribe as always. Do check back soon for more reviews and recommendations, all things good and heavy. Thank you, my friends. Stay heavy.